is Saurabh, and you're listening to my favorite talk show, The Weekly Show with Aditya.
This is episode 451 on the 3rd of December 2021. As we come out of the euphoria of the 450th episode and back into regular programming, so much has been happening over the last few days as we enter the final days of 2021. It may be the final weeks remaining for 2021, but sure it looks like 1984 with so much of misinformation and panic spreading, and for a few individuals this panic like situation is heavenly because they thrive on such misinformation, panic, and all kinds of data being thrown around of about certain situation. It really makes me it really brings out the humor in me because I'm not surprised by the kind of information that has been spreading over the past few weeks, because of 2021 but sure looks like 1984. The infodemic about the Frankenstein's monster is getting out of hand. Everyone who thinks themselves as an expert, even if they are not, or if their expertise is under doubt because they are not, and because the proof they have to show their expertise doesn't count. But here, the infodemic about the Frankenstein monster is getting out of hand. Anyone and everyone who thinks they have some kind of pertinent information about some incident that is happening, they think they are the best and they can give that kind of information, and that has made us all zombies, that is smartphone zombies. Right now everybody who has a smartphone is on their smartphone or dumb smartphone or on their cell phone, which means they read information about a particular incident or about a particular thing happening, then they send it to their peers who further send it to their peers, but we don't know if the information being sent is fact or fiction. But the last 20 months have been all about making sure that fiction becomes a fact, and it's not difficult to put the world under hostage. It's not, people are gullible, people have been gullible. No amount of technology will take away the gullibility factor from individuals. Human beings will be gullible till the
It's
time
10
human
hours.
beings are on this planet, and that's not going away. So the infodemic that keeps on coming every day in print media, electronic media, pseudo media for the past 20 months, sometimes we say the situation is better, but how can the situation be better? Because the situation cannot be better because it doesn't make a few individuals happy. They want people to panic, and unless people panic, how will they profit? So the infodemic has continued, it has come back, it goes, it comes back again like stock market, it's up and down, and now it's getting out of hand because we have created smobbies. But more on that later. Let's take a short break for now. Welcome back after the break. Let's carry on the discussion. As I talked about the final days, let's talk about something interesting. After losing their first match in the group game, everyone thought that in the Junior World Cup, the Hockey Junior World Cup, India would be knocked out. But somehow they made it past the group stages. They have beaten a couple of decent international teams, and they now have a match set up with Germany in the semi final, which means they are 2 games away from winning consecutive Junior World Cup matches. But there is no conversation surrounding it. And only for the semi-finals did the broadcasters decide to telecast the match. Till if India had not reached the semi-final, I suppose there would have been no conversation around it. But then India were knocked out from the group stage in the Cricket World Cup. They have reached the semi-finals of the Hockey World Cup. But who compares? Will if India goes on to win the Hockey World Cup, will it make any difference in the upcoming tournaments? Because the Hockey Champions Trophy is just 2 weeks away. So, will it be possible that they will pick up 7, 8 players from the junior team and draft them into the senior team? Because unlike cricket, where you need to play A matches or list A matches or domestic matches or first class matches or this and that, and you need to play 100 matches to show that you are experienced, because international experience and let's say semi international experiences are two different things. In hockey, it doesn't matter whether it's the Champions Trophy or the World Cup or the Olympics or the Junior World Cup, unless you are injured or the governing body doesn't like the way you play or the coach feels you haven't performed. For hockey, it doesn't matter which tournament you play because they're all at an equal level. If India does well at this World Cup and they do equally well at the Champions Trophy, the Asian Champions Trophy to be precise, then that's perfect practice. They did well in Olympics. You don't need much of a planning. For hockey, it doesn't the precise tournament is irrelevant because unlike cricket, there are no formats. You don't have to transform from 20 overs to 50 overs to 5 days. It's all the same. It's the same planning. It's 60 minutes. It's the same drag flickers or forwards. Personnel may change, but the plan remains the same, and that's how it is. So, what does one look at? But there won't be conversation around this because it's hockey and then it's a junior World Cup, which means players who are trying to make their name, who are trying to get into the senior team per se in this situation. And that's how things are. And it's a very, very interesting situation. So, yes, it's going to be a mouth watering match. I will certainly watch this particular game. So it's at 7:30 p.m. tonight. Do watch and give some kind of pseudo cheering for your team, because that will be a very, very interesting situation as to how things pan out in this particular match. As I said, in hockey, it doesn't matter which format it is because there are no formats. The tournament is irrelevant. It's all on how you plan, and that's how it is. But more on that later. Something very interesting has happened. As everyone knew, everyone was anticipating the India New Zealand Test Championship second match in Bombay, but the match has been delayed due to wet ground, wet outfield, which is interesting. This can only happen in cricket, that the scheduled start was around 9:45 a.m., but the umpires came for inspection and they found that the areas around the pitch and the far off areas, they are damp. It will be problematic for the players if they slip or injure themselves. And with rains lashing that part of the country, especially Bombay and the southern part, it looks as if, I have my doubts. It's not raining. If it was raining, it's fine. It's raining, you can't do anything. It's not, it's cloudy or it's partly sunny, but it is kind of ridiculous that you have to delay the match because of a wet ground. In hockey, during the break, you wet the ground so that the ball travels fast. In cricket, you have to make sure that the ground is dry, bone dry, and no amount of drainage system would have sustained the kind of rains that came, which once again is, I question the venue selection policy. If the last match was affected by bad light and being in the northern part of the country because of winters and smog and fog and whatnot, we are in the western and the southern half of the country right now, and once again something is preventing us to start the match. And let's say the umpires come again in 25 minutes time, they will once again say not good enough, we'll come after 1 hour. Then at 11 o'clock they will say let's have lunch. Who has lunch at 11 o'clock? That baffles me, but that's the way things are. And it will not start today. Or even if it does, like let's take the example of the Sri Lanka West Indies match. It rained, but the ground had enough drainage system or a good drainage system to absorb the water, and the ground was bone dry, and somehow day one had 35 overs. Can that happen here? Because there it was raining and the match only happened after tea around 2 p.m. So can they do something? Because if the sun comes out, can the sun come out enough with enough energy to dry up the field? Because that will be a very interesting situation. As we see the West Indies Sri Lanka match, we have come to a situation where Sri Lanka were 100 for 0 in their first innings. They were bowled out for around 200. West Indies were in a good position. They took a lead of 50, but it wasn't enough because they also collapsed after being 100 for 1. And then Sri Lanka were 40 for 2. They were in trouble in their second innings, but the number 9 and 10, or someone who I have liked for a long time, a certain Dhananjay De Silva, because when you say Sri Lanka, you say Ranatunga and Jayasuriya and Arvinda De Silva and Sangakkara and Jayawardene and Muralidharan and Vas. We can't get out of being obsessed about these 3-4 individuals. And when you say West Indies, you are still obsessed with Clive Lloyd and Gordon Greenidge, who were playing in some prehistoric times. Right? Prehistoric times, we are still obsessed. We don't want to look at the current lot and say, can they do the job for the next decade or so? I think Sri Lanka always had good players. We can't be obsessed with Sangakkara and Jayawardene. They have done their job. They came, they played for 15 years. They are done. They are now in some other official capacity. We cannot be obsessed with them all the time. And that's what irks me. So here we are, the final day of this match. It rained on day one, but we have a situation where you have West Indies have to make around 300 runs to win this match. Sri Lanka has 10 wickets and they have good players like Ramesh Mendes, Lassit Embuldenia, but let's see what happens. As Mendes bowls to Jeremiah Blackwood, you'll say, who is this Blackwood? We don't know. Exactly. And that's what irks me. Yes, you had players, but they played 40, 50 years ago. They retired. They're in their 80s and 90s. They don't care. As I said, there is no concept of West Indies. It's only a concept in cricket. If you look at other sports, you have Usain Bolt, whom we are so proud of. He is from Jamaica. He never says, I am from West Indies. Or even Chris Gale won't say, I am from West Indies, because West Indies is just for the sake of the game. But if Chris Gale will say, I am from a particular island, or the current 11 players will say, I am proud to be a Barbadian from Barbados or Jamaica or whatever
10:50.
islands are there in that part of the world. As the third ball of the second over from Ramesh Mendes, he bowls once again, a loud appeal, but it's going down the leg side, and that's what I liked. Can the Indian umpires take a decision that, okay, if let's say around 1 p.m. Indian time, they feel that the ground is dry and the sun has come out, can we have a match? Can we do that? will the umpire and the match referee have enough in them? Because if they don't, I'll blame them. Because what happens if they call up the match, let's say around 11 o'clock, and at 11:30 they're interviewing a player who's standing right in the middle of the ground and being interviewed? If that can happen, then why can't the match happen? So if the match doesn't happen, the umpires and the match referee, well, I would have done better in that situation. As his ball is driven away, so after 2 overs, West Indies chasing 300 runs are 3 for 0. Can they chase? Let's see. Because at one point, Sri Lanka were 220 for 8, and yet somehow they made it to 345. So, yes, if they can, so can they. And then when you talk about the current lot, we might still give some kind of recognition to players like Chandimal and Matthews who've been playing long enough in this particular sport, but we are still obsessed by a certain lot. At least in India, we have moved on. Though ironically, we still talk about Lakshman and Dravid and Tendulkar and Gavaskar. They're not playing anymore. They are now in their managerial capacity. They all retired 10, 20, 30 years ago. Why do we still keep talking about them? I don't know why. It baffles me. And then talking about final days, once again, the final day discussion has come up. Everyone is after, as I said in the last episode, after Rahane and Pujara, which is like, why are you after them? They're they're not the first Indian players who may have not made runs over a period of time. I'm not worried. So they don't make runs. How does it make a difference? Why are we worried about two players? If it's a team game, then performance of individual player doesn't matter. If Rahane makes 45 of 120 and he's in a partnership of 150 with another player and the team goes to 300, why will I be worried about whether he averages 19 or he averages 90? And that's what irks me, because average journalists who don't even deserve to be in that capacity talk about players average. Even a few good newspapers, I would name which newspapers, I think they've also lost their intellectual capacity and they're all so obsessed with this average, that he's averaging 21, he's averaging 19. Why this discussion? Why this discussion? This sustained discussion, where I'm not impressed with this sustained discussion. I'm not impressed. It doesn't impress me at all. But let's look at the West Indies Sri Lanka match as we come to the end of the third over. Ends the over by Embuldenia. Who's Embuldenia? Nobody knows. But if you say Muralidharan, oh, guy who took 800 wickets, well, let me tell you that some of the wickets were just questionable wickets. I wouldn't really count them as something great, but that's the way things are, and that's the baffling part of this whole thing. But that's now the interesting part is that as far as, well, a few people will be very happy as far as targeting a few players are concerned, because Rahane is out due to injury. How did they sustain an injury? I had no idea. How do players get injured when they play the full match? And how in 2 days' time, after the first match ends, and just a gap of 2 or 3 days, they're suddenly injured. How does that happen? I have no idea. But the match has not started. But Williamson has tennis elbow. He's been having that tennis elbow issue for decades. I don't know how, why, how do they do it? I have no idea. How is it exaggerated or exaggerated? I have no idea. So, no Jadeja, which is surprising. Ishant Sharma, one would say he is prone to injuries. Well, I'll give you a worse list than that. You can't go after certain players because you cannot be so have such a conversation on injuries, or my hand and my fist and somebody else's face will give you an injury you will never be able to recover from. So never talk about that. So yes, no Ishant, no Rahane, and no Jadeja, which is surprising. But they have an off-spinning all-rounder in Jayant Yadav. I suppose he'll come in. Rahane goes out, Kohli comes in. That is fine. Saha is fit somehow, which is surprising. The guy had a neck trouble, yet he's fine. But Ishant, Rahane are injured. I don't know how does it happen. And yet, what will happen is Saha won't be able to keep. You will once again see the Srikar Bharat come and keep. So the plan will be Saha doesn't keep. He comes only when it is needed as far as the batting is concerned. So which means will they go with the extra batter because they don't have Jadeja at number 6? Can they risk Ashwin at number 6? Which will be a surprise situation, though I don't know what's going to happen. It will be all on the players and others to see what exactly happens. That's the way it is. Sri Lanka, after 4 overs, as his ball is driven away beautifully into the outfield, after 4 overs, it's 8-0 West Indies. Now, the match hasn't started. They're supposed to inspect in the next few minutes, which is surprising, but that's the way things are. That's the way things are in these situations. So, will the match happen? Well, if the umpires come in and they're not happy about inspection, we will never know how the thing pans out, which is strange. But we're in the final days of 2021, and how has the year been for me? I think the year has been absolutely fine. I've enjoyed myself, no complaints. For me, it's just another 12 months of just another numbered year. Do I believe in things like new resolution? I never did. I never will. I don't need a new resolution. I had no resolution and yet I was able to publish 2 books. I don't need to have a resolution that I will not do this or I will not do this activity, which is a wrong activity. I don't fall for such things. New resolutions are for the coward and the weak, only because if you spend so much time worrying about what your resolution will be, then you have no this thing. Don't When you have done 451 episodes, you don't need to have a new resolution. And my only target, well, that still it will take time. As I said in the last episode, now we are 549 episodes away from reaching 1,000 episodes. And I challenge my listeners to tell me if they have any talk show, except for the ones which come on TV and through networks, talk shows which come through the digital format, that is on the digital media, that has any talk show in a sustained period of time without taking a break, without going off air for a while or having a gap of 15 days between 2 episodes. Has any talk show completed 1,000 episodes? Give me a list, because this talk show will, but it has nothing to do with the New Year resolution. So, West Indies 4.5 overs, they are 8 for no loss as Embledenia bowls to Brathwaite, who cuts straight to the fielder. 5 gone, 8 for 0. 100 overs for Sri Lanka to take 10 wickets, and 90 overs for Sri Lanka to take 10 wickets, and 90 overs for the West Indies to score the remaining 290 runs. So, a very interesting situation developing. So, well, if you have any doubts whether the match will start, the only sport in the world which is affected by something as ridiculous as a wet ground, yes, sometimes tennis is affected, but that's for a short while. But then, since you have the squared circle and you have to protect the players, then that's why my question is, why don't we have grounds with covering? And the venue selection committee or whoever decides the venue has to look at these things. In India, where do you have the match? Southern part influenced by rain, the northern part, the southern, western, and eastern part, eastern coast, always affected by rain, the northern part always affected by fog between November and March, and you know it. And you know it. Everyone knows it. This discussion just doesn't stop. Then why do you have a match in November? Why don't we have a match somewhere between February and April? It means it's not too hot, rain won't come into play, fog won't come into play. So whoever decides this has to make sure that this happens. Yes, one can say too much of rains link everything to climate change. That's just a weak discussion. So yes, whoever is deciding about rains, and yes, today the umpires have to be brave. If by 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock local time it's good enough, they should sit with the match referee and the officials and the players that let's have 2 hours of game, let's have 30 overs of a game. Let's not do it. So if by 1 o'clock local time, that is Indian time, it's good enough, then let's say let's have a match at 1:30 and let's have a match till 5 p.m. local time. If it's bright enough, that will be a brave decision. That will be like an un-Indian decision because nobody in the world have never seen an if it could be a possibility and I know won't be surprised but a day may be called off at 11:30, 12 o'clock local time. The teams may decide or the match officials, that is the umpire and the match referee, may say, well, we are sorry, it's too dangerous for the players. We cannot have a match, even if it's bone dry, but some patches are wet and it's not good enough. We have tried everything. We have tried heaters, we have tried hoovers, we have tried all kinds of methodology to have the match. But if it's good enough, if at 12:30 it's dry, then the umpire should say, let's have a match, even if it's only 30-35 overs. That will be a brave call, but I have my doubts. Don't be surprised if you are following it on digital or on cable networks at by 11:30, 12 o'clock, the umpires say it's too wet or too dangerous to have a match. But that won't be a brave decision. That will be a poor decision if later we come to know that the ground wasn't that dangerous. Only patches were which could have been dried out as the sun came out. So I hope the umpires take a very conscious call. But well, everyone wanted Rahane out, and if the entire world wants somebody out, you can uh, have a fictional injury, and that's exactly what's happened. I don't know where did this injury come from because all this really baffles me. Maybe they were injured during the course of the match, but then that's for everyone, and that's what baffles me. But that's the way the sport is played. Some things can't be explained, and complicated stuff keeps on happening. Can't do anything about it, and that's the nature of this particular sport, and that's how it is. But for now, let's take a short break.
It's 10:30.
So this ends episode number 451 on the 3rd of December 2021, and stay tuned for the next episode.
For more awesome content, tune in to the next episode of the weekly show.
And I will be back on Monday, the 6th of December 2021 with episode number 452 at 10:30 a.m. IST, or possibly even before that. And while you wait for the next episode over the weekend, what can you do? Well, you can put these books in your must read books column and in your purchase column. Do not forget to read these classics, the best in their fields. So put these books in your must read books column.